My burner phone vibrated across the marble nightstand, its blue screen cutting through the dark like a police beacon. The clock beside it read 2:03 a.m. I caught the phone before it reached the edge. Beyond the bedroom windows, Manhattan glowed in fractured gold, while the heating pipes clicked softly inside the walls. Calls to that number never brought good news. Moretti. A fluorescent light buzzed on the other end. Beneath it came the scrape of a chair, the rustle of paper, and the flat voice of a man trained not to reveal what he knew. Mr. Luca Moretti? You called my private number. You know who this is. A pause followed, just long enough to become deliberate. This is Detective Harris with the 21st Precinct. We have Evelyn Brooks in custody. My fingers stopped against the phone's cold glass. Evelyn was my auditor, the quiet woman who could find a missing dollar inside 10 years of false invoices. She never raised her voice, never arrived late, never carried anything outside the office without recording it first. On what charge? I asked. That hasn't been determined. Then she isn't under arrest. She was stopped carrying financial records connected to several companies your organization controls. The room seemed to narrow around the sound of that sentence. I pushed back the sheets and set my feet on the chilled hardwood. My shoulder holster hung untouched over a walnut chair, but I reached instead for the lamp. Amber light spilled across the room, revealing the untouched whiskey on my desk and the red status light of the security panel. Was she injured? No. Has she been questioned? Another paper shifted near his receiver. We attempted to interview her. She declined. Good. Put her attorney on. She refused counsel. That made me stand still. Evelyn had memorized every emergency protocol I had ever given her. If questioned, she was to request counsel, say nothing, and wait. No exceptions. She had followed those rules for 6 years with the precision of a metronome. Which lawyer did she refuse? All of them. The public defender. The attorney whose number was in her wallet. Even the counsel who called claiming to represent your companies. Somewhere behind Harris, a metal door slammed. The echo rolled down a tiled corridor, followed by the muted crackle of a police radio. I crossed to the window. My reflection stared back from the glass. White shirt open at the throat, phone pressed to my ear. The city spread beneath me like property I could no longer assume I controlled. Why are you calling me? I asked. Harris exhaled through his nose. Because Ms. Brooks has not answered a single question. She won't explain where the files came from, where she was taking them, or why some of them bear authorization codes linked to you. Then charge her or release her. She gave us one condition. My thumb tightened against the edge of the phone. What condition? The detective lowered his voice, and the station noise receded behind 6 words delivered with unsettling care. I will only speak to Luca Moretti. Silence filled my bedroom. Evelyn had not asked for rescue. She had summoned the one man whose appearance at a police station could connect her custody directly to his empire. Let me speak to her, I said. She declined the phone. Did she say anything else? Nothing. A faint knock sounded through the line. Harris covered the receiver, exchanged a few muffled words, then returned. Mr. Moretti, if you are coming, come now. Federal agents have been notified. The call ended. I remained beside the glass as the dial tone flattened into silence. On the avenue 30 floors below, a black sedan idled beneath a street lamp, exhaust curling from its tailpipe into the freezing air. Evelyn had broken every rule I had taught her, but she had done it too precisely to be panicking. I buttoned my shirt, took my coat from the chair, and left the gun where it was. By asking for me, Evelyn had placed my name inside the station before I ever crossed its doors. Now I had to discover why she needed me there in person. Fluorescent light washed the 21st Precinct in a color that made everyone look already convicted. Wet tires hissed beyond the barred windows, while inside, radiators clanged against the January cold and burnt coffee soured the air. I crossed the lobby at 2:34 a.m. without a weapon, an attorney, or the illusion that I had arrived unseen. Detective Harris waited beside the metal detector, his tie loosened and his gray shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows. His gaze moved past me toward the glass entrance, where a dark government sedan had parked across the street. You understand walking in here may be the most expensive decision of your life, he said. Take me to Evelyn. Harris led me through a corridor lined with scuffed tile and locked doors. Every camera turned my passage into evidence. At the interview room, thick glass divided Evelyn Brooks from the chair reserved for me. Her coat was gone. One cuff remained fastened to the steel ring on the table, and the red groove around her wrist showed how long she had been waiting. A paper cup stood untouched near her elbow. Beside it lay a clear evidence sleeve containing photocopied ledger pages. Evelyn looked at me once, then lowered her eyes to the documents. She did not ask whether I had brought bail money. She did not ask for protection. "You came alone," she said through the telephone receiver. "You asked for me alone." Her thumb slid along the bottom edge of the glass. Page 14. I picked up my receiver. Harris remained behind me, close enough to hear my voice, but not hers. Evelyn turned the top ledger page within the evidence sleeve and pressed one fingernail against a transfer dated 3 months earlier. The entry showed $4.8 million moving through Moretti Freight Holdings into an account identified only by 4 digits. My authorization code sat beside it. Her audit initials appeared underneath. "That transaction cleared," I said. "The real one did," she replied. "For $480,000. The hum of the fluorescent fixture seemed to sharpen. Evelyn tapped the extra zero, then traced my authorization code. One character had been altered so cleanly that an investigator scanning the page would see confirmation, not forgery. "Your code makes you the source," she said. Her finger moved to her initials. "Mine makes me the witness who approved it." The alteration did more than inflate a transfer. It turned my network into the owner of missing money and Evelyn into the accountant who had certified the theft. If federal agents accepted the page as genuine, I would lose my freedom while she lost the one thing no court could restore with an apology, her professional name. I studied the spacing, the ink density, the alignment of the numbers. The change had been made by someone who understood both our systems and her habits. Evelyn met my eyes through the scratched glass, steady and dry. Then she covered the false entry with her palm and uncovered it again, a silent instruction to remember every mark. Harris stepped forward. "Time." Evelyn ignored him. "They didn't detain me because they found your books," she said. "They detained me because someone rewrote one page so neither of us could survive it." Harris reached for my receiver, but I held it against my ear. Across the glass, Evelyn turned the ledger toward me and placed her cuffed hand beside her forged initials. "If you leave without claiming who I work for," she said, "this page becomes the only relationship between us." The lock clicked behind my chair. Somewhere in the corridor, an elevator chimed, followed by measured footsteps approaching the interview room. Evelyn had not summoned me to rescue her. She had brought me there to choose, under cameras and before federal agents arrived, whether I would deny her or put my own name beside hers. The elevator doors opened with a muted bell, and polished shoes struck the tile beyond the interview room. Detective Harris reached again for the receiver. "Federal agents are here." I rose before he could disconnect us, the plastic cord stretching across the steel counter. Through the glass, Evelyn remained seated beneath the hard white light, one cuff fixed to the table and the altered ledger open beneath her palm. "Then they can hear me clearly," I said. Harris stopped. The radiator knocked twice in the silence. Cold air leaked around the window frame, carrying the wet mineral smell of January pavement into the overheated room. "Careful, Mr. Moretti," Harris said. "Anything you claim now becomes part of the record." That was the shelter they expected me to choose. Distance, ambiguity, a lawyer's polished denial. For 6 years, Evelyn had worked behind locked doors and numbered companies, visible only to the men who needed her precision and invisible whenever that precision became dangerous. I set the receiver down, stepped into the corridor, and faced the camera mounted above the interview room door. Its red light burned steadily. 2 federal agents approached beside Harris, their dark coats still shining with rain. One carried a slim evidence folder. The other switched on a recorder. "State your reason for being here," she said. My coat felt heavy across my shoulders, damp wool warming under the ceiling vents. Beyond the glass, Evelyn lifted her eyes. She did not nod. She did not ask. "Evelyn Brooks is my auditor," I said. "She works directly for me. The records in your custody were handled within the scope of that employment, and I instructed her to maintain them." Harris's jaw tightened. The agent with the recorder took one step closer. "You understand you are establishing a direct connection to the companies named in those documents?" I understand every word I used. The hallway lost its small sounds. No ringing telephones. No scraping chairs. Even the radiator seemed to hold its breath. Harris looked through the window at the forged initials, then at the custody sheet in his hand. Without Evelyn's statement, and with my formal acknowledgement explaining her possession of the files, their basis for holding her had narrowed to a page neither side could yet authenticate. "Remove the cuff," he told the uniformed officer. Metal clicked against metal. Evelyn rubbed the pale groove around her wrist, but left the ledger untouched until Harris sealed it inside the evidence folder. Minutes later, the lock released, and she walked into the corridor carrying only her coat. I held it open. She slid her arms into the sleeves without thanking me, her gaze fixed instead on the federal recorder. The agent closed the evidence folder. "Ms. Brooks is free to leave," she said. Then she handed Harris a document bearing the federal seal. "Mr. Moretti is not to leave the jurisdiction." Effective immediately, Evelyn's fingers paused at the top button of her coat. By claiming her before the cameras, I had opened the cell door behind her and placed an invisible one around myself. Outside, dawn was still hours away. Camera shutters began snapping beyond the precinct entrance, sharp as breaking ice, while federal agents moved between me and the street. Someone had expected Evelyn to disappear inside that building. Instead, she walked out beside me, and every lens waiting in the rain recorded exactly who had chosen her. Rainwater crawled down the sedan windows, bending the precinct's white lights into crooked bars. Before the car reached the second intersection, 3 phones began vibrating against the leather console, their screens flashing the names of men who never called twice. Luca answered none of them. Beside him, Evelyn watched the city slide past in silver and black, her released wrist still marked by the cuff. Then the sedan slowed. The security gate at Moretti headquarters remained shut. Its keypad glowed red beneath the rain. Luca's driver tried his access card again. A flat electronic buzz answered. "Accounts are frozen," the guard said through the intercom. "Operating, payroll, reserve. Mr. Vale's orders." Luca looked toward the cameras above the gate. Their lenses had turned away from the street and directly toward his car. Dominic wanted him seen outside. Inside the building's boardroom, cigar smoke hung beneath amber pendant lights, and untouched whiskey reflected the long walnut table. 6 capos sat around Dominic Vale, whose charcoal suit remained immaculate despite the hour. Bank letters, transfer denials, and authorization forms lay before them. Dominic had not merely locked money away. He had made every man in the room feel his own wallet closing. "Luca placed his name on a police record for a bookkeeper," Dominic said. His fingertip pressed against a photograph of Evelyn leaving the precinct beside Luca. "Now federal agents have our companies, our ledgers, and his admission connecting them." One capo shifted in his chair. Another removed Luca's silver signet pin from his lapel and set it on the table. The tiny metallic click carried farther than a shout. Dominic lifted the photograph. "A woman who keeps books has weakened the man who gives orders." The boardroom doors opened. Cold air entered first, carrying rain and exhaust from the underground garage. Luca stepped inside with Evelyn behind him. No guards accompanied them. The men who usually rose remained seated. Dominic smiled and slid an authorization sheet across the polished wood. "Sign temporary control to me. I reopened the accounts before breakfast." Luca did not touch the paper. "You froze payroll? I protected the organization. You made soldiers choose between loyalty and feeding their families." Dominic's smile thinned. "You chose her before you chose them." Every face turned toward Evelyn. She removed her damp coat and folded it over the back of an empty chair, slow enough that no one could mistake composure for surrender. "My salary is in those accounts too," she said. "So if this is punishment, Mr. Vale, at least admit you aimed it at everyone." A capo's knuckles stopped tapping. Dominic leaned back, leather creaking beneath him. "A clerk does not speak at this table." Luca crossed to the head chair, but did not sit. He picked up the silver pin that had been abandoned and placed it beside Dominic's authorization sheet. "Neither does a thief wearing another man's authority." No accusation followed. None was needed for the room to feel the line being drawn. Dominic stood and tapped his phone. Around the table, screens lit one after another with notices. Credit canceled, cash access suspended, shipments placed on hold. "By noon," Dominic said, "every crew will decide whether it follows a boss trapped inside federal jurisdiction or the man who can still pay them." The heating system hummed, yet the room seemed to lose another 10 degrees. Luca tore the authorization sheet once, then again, letting the pieces fall across Dominic's shoes. Keep the accounts frozen. For the first time, Dominic's jaw tightened. Luca turned toward Evelyn. She was no longer looking at the men around the table. Her eyes rested on the locked archive door at the far end of the room. Behind them, Dominic delivered his ultimatum in a voice as smooth as poured whiskey. Then at noon, Luca, this empire stops being yours. The elevator cables groaned behind the paneled walls, and the red numbers above the conference room door descended toward the lobby. Cold white light pooled across the torn authorization at Dominic's feet. While the capos began making calls, Evelyn slid one hand into her coat and felt the sealed emergency envelope sewn inside the lining. $12,000, a clean identification card, and a bus ticket west. 6 years earlier, Luca had ordered every senior employee to keep an escape reserve. No questions, no permission required. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Its doors opened onto an empty brass-lined car. Luca stood several feet away, his phone vibrating with warnings from crews abandoning him. He looked at the envelope in Evelyn's hand, then pressed the lobby button. The car downstairs will take you anywhere. No command, no debt disguised as protection, just an exit. Evelyn stepped into the elevator. The doors closed between them, sealing out Dominic's low laughter and the dry rustle of capos choosing sides. In the mirrored wall, she saw gray custody marks around her wrists and a streak of precinct ink on her cuff. The display passed 12, 11, 10. Then her eyes dropped to the old brass key on her ring, the one Luca had given her when she reorganized the headquarters records, before Dominic replaced the archive lock 3 months ago. At the 4th floor, Evelyn pressed stop. The car jolted, its motor whining overhead. She opened the envelope, removed the cash, and tucked it behind the emergency panel. The ticket and false identification followed. When the elevator resumed upward, she carried only the key. The archive corridor smelled of dust, chilled steel, and lemon wax. A security light cast long bars across the carpet. Dominic's new electronic lock guarded the door, but beneath its black casing remained the original brass cylinder. Evelyn inserted the old key. Metal scraped. The bolt withdrew. Inside, shelves rose into darkness, packed with bankers' boxes and duplicate ledgers Dominic believed had been destroyed. Evelyn shut the door and switched on a green-shaded desk lamp. Paper whispered beneath her fingers as she moved through numbered files, ignoring cash books and shipment manifests until she found the gray reconciliation binder from the previous quarter. Her own audit marks appeared in blue pencil. Across them ran newer entries in black ink. Transfers routed through a dormant vendor, approved with a copied version of Luca's signature. Evelyn photographed each page, then removed the carbon duplicate hidden beneath the binding cloth. The first set showed Dominic siphoning money from reserves for 18 months. The final page changed everything. A payment of $25,000 had been sent to a shell company 2 days before her arrest. Its invoice referenced document recovery. Stapled behind it was a handwritten authorization for an off-duty police contact to place selected records in her custody and arrange the stop that delivered her to the 21st precinct. Footsteps sounded outside. Slow, certain. Evelyn slipped the duplicate ledger beneath her coat and opened the door before whoever approached could trap her inside. Luca stood beneath the security light, alone. His gaze moved from the unlocked door to the empty envelope in her hand. "Your car left," he said. "Without me." She placed the final payment record against his chest. The paper crackled between them. "Dominic stole from you," Evelyn said. "Then he paid a police officer to put me in custody with the altered files." At the far end of the corridor, the elevator chimed again. Voices spilled out, Dominic's among them. Evelyn closed Luca's fingers around the evidence and turned toward the approaching men. This time, the auditor was not waiting for her boss to choose her. She had returned to choose the ground on which they would face his betrayer. Cold air poured through the corridor as the elevator doors opened, carrying the smell of wet wool and cigarette smoke. Dominic Vale stepped out with 4 men, his polished shoes tapping over black marble. Luca folded the payment record once and slipped it inside his coat. Evelyn remained beside the archive door, the duplicate ledger hard against her ribs. "Move away from her," Dominic said. Luca did not reach for a weapon. He had left it behind before entering the 21st precinct, and the emptiness beneath his coat now forced every decision into the open. His phone vibrated. A shipping broker's name glowed on the screen. The man who controlled Moretti freight moving through the East River terminals. Luca answered and placed the call on speaker. Dominic offered us the route, the broker said. Wind battered the receiver. Full control, effective at dawn, if we deliver the auditor to him. Evelyn's eyes shifted toward Luca. That route carried nearly half the organization's legitimate imports and most of its hidden cash flow. Losing it would not freeze money on a screen. It would erase millions in contracts, warehouse leases, and alliances built over 12 years. Dominic smiled. Give me the ledger and let Miss Brooks walk downstairs with my men. The route stays yours. Luca looked at Evelyn. Is the evidence enough? Enough to prove the theft and the police payoff, she said. Not enough if I disappear before it reaches anyone. A freight horn moaned beyond the rain-streaked windows. Luca lifted the phone. You want the route? He asked the broker. Take it. Every dock, truck, warehouse slot, and contract. None of my people will contest the transfer. The corridors seemed to contract around the words. Dominic's smile vanished. The broker hesitated. Luca, once I file this, there's no reversing it. File it now. In exchange, the East Service Passage remains open for 10 minutes, and Evelyn Brooks crosses it untouched. Papers shuffled over the speaker. A keyboard clicked. Then came the flat confirmation. Moretti Freight had surrendered exclusive access to its most profitable corridor. By sunrise, millions of dollars would belong to men who had once toasted Luca as family. One of Dominic's companions lowered his gaze and stepped toward the elevator. Another followed. Their loyalty had always smelled like money. Now the price had changed hands. Luca took the duplicate ledger from Evelyn and placed it inside a waterproof document case on the archive shelf. You're leaving, he said. Her jaw tightened. I came back to stand with you. And you did. Now make it matter. He pressed a brass service key into her palm. No bodyguard waited below. No reserve cash softened the risk. The only protection left was the agreement Luca had purchased by cutting away the richest artery of his own empire. Evelyn closed her fingers around the key, then removed the payment record from Luca's coat and tucked it beside the ledger. I'll carry the originals, she said. You keep copies. If one of us is stopped, the other finishes it. This time, Luca did not overrule her. He copied every page on the archive machine, while its hot toner filled the room with a metallic smell. Evelyn sealed the originals beneath her coat and walked toward the service stairs. On Luca's phone, messages arrived in a hard, relentless rhythm. Contracts canceled, crews defecting, warehouse partners withdrawing protection. Dominic watched each vibration as if hearing a building collapse floor by floor. The service door shut behind Evelyn. A second later, Luca received the broker's final notice. The transfer was complete, and every old ally tied to the route had formally abandoned him. Dominic straightened his cuffs. You traded an empire for 10 minutes. Luca faced him beneath the sterile security light, holding only the copies. No, he said. I paid to find out what she does with them. From beyond the steel door came the fading cadence of Evelyn's steps, carrying evidence toward an uncertain exit, while Dominic reached slowly for his own phone. His first call would decide whether Luca's sacrifice had bought her freedom or merely started a more dangerous clock. A soft electronic chirp sounded inside Luca's jacket, followed by the dry click of Dominic unlocking his phone. Fluorescent light washed the corridor in a colorless glare. Behind the steel service door, Evelyn's footsteps stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Dominic raised the phone toward his ear. Make the East Passage unusable. The intercom above him crackled before the call could connect. Evelyn's voice emerged through its dented speaker, calm beneath the hiss of old wiring. Don't bother. The transaction already cleared. Dominic's thumb froze over the screen. Luca looked toward the black security lens in the ceiling. A red indicator blinked once, and Evelyn stepped into view on the wall monitor beside the archive. She stood in the East Service Passage, the original ledger pressed beneath one arm, its worn leather covered dark against her gray coat. Exposed pipes rattled overhead. Somewhere beyond her, a freight elevator groaned through concrete. You knew he'd make that call, Lucas said. I knew he'd panic when you chose me over the route, Evelyn replied. Dominic lowered the phone by an inch. The corridor suddenly seemed too narrow for him. Evelyn opened the payoff record and held one page toward the camera. The money he stole proved motive. The payment to the police contact proved conspiracy. but neither proved who controlled the final handoff. Luca's copies whispered as his grip tightened. So you let them take you. I let them believe they had surprised me. Her eyes remained fixed on the lens. The selected records were planted badly. Wrong staple marks. Wrong filing sequence. I knew the arrest was staged before they put me in the car. Dominic's jaw shifted. Then why ask for him? Evelyn turned slightly, listening to something approaching beyond the passage. Because you would ignore an auditor in custody. But you would watch Luca Moretti walk into a police station. The answer cut cleaner than an accusation. She had not refused counsel because she expected Luca's influence to open a cell. She had used the one name Dominic could not hear without moving money, calling allies, and protecting himself. Luca's public appearance had forced the hidden machinery into motion. Account freezes. Emergency transfers. The offer involving the freight route. The police contact's final payment. Every act of self-preservation had created a record. I needed him visible, Evelyn said. And I needed you frightened. Dominic's phone vibrated in his hand. One pending call glowed on the screen, its destination masked, but its timing unmistakable. Evelyn lifted her own phone toward the security camera. A recording timer was running, counting the seconds since Dominic had entered the corridor. Luca understood then why she had insisted they divide the evidence. The ledger was not merely insurance. His copies anchored the financial trail. Hers carried the original proof. Dominic's next words could bind both halves together. Evelyn had turned her detention into bait, Luca's protection into pressure, and Dominic's arrogance into testimony. You gambled with my freedom, Luca said, his voice low. No, the speaker popped with static. I gambled with mine. You decided what yours was worth. For the first time, Dominic looked not at Luca, but at the camera. His reflection hovered faintly on the monitor. Tailored suit, raised phone, nowhere left to hide behind another man's orders. Then a metallic chime rolled through the east passage. The freight elevator had arrived. Evelyn glanced toward its closed doors, but did not retreat. The final transaction is moving now, she said. If Dominic completes that call, the record becomes undeniable. If he doesn't, the man expecting it will know he has failed. Dominic's screen vibrated again, demanding an answer. Luca stepped between him and the archive door, not reaching for the device, not giving him the mercy of force. The choice had to belong to Dominic. Evelyn's timer continued counting through the speaker. 12 seconds. 13. 14. Dominic stared at the waiting call, then at the evidence in Luca's hand. You think you trapped me? He whispered. Evelyn's face remained steady beneath the passage's cold amber light. No, Dominic. I gave you a private place to tell us who you are. The elevator doors opened behind her with a heavy mechanical scrape. At the same instant, Dominic pressed the phone to his ear. Change of plan, he said. Take Luca Moretti instead. Cold air poured through the open freight elevator, carrying the smell of rain, diesel, and wet concrete into the amber-lit corridor. From Dominic's phone came a faint reply, distorted by static. Confirm the target. Luca watched Dominic's thumb hover over the screen. The order had changed the danger, but not the evidence. If Luca remained inside the building, Dominic could deny what he meant. If Luca stepped outside, the men waiting beyond the east passage would move, and the recorded command would become conspiracy in motion. Evelyn reached for the elevator controls. Luca caught the steel door with one hand. No, he said. You bought the trap. I'll close it. Evelyn's gaze moved from his face to the copies inside his coat. They expect you to protect your throne. Then tonight they learn I can walk away from it. Luca removed his signet ring and placed it on the archive floor. The small piece of black and gold struck the concrete with a sharp metallic click. Every capo in the organization recognized that ring as his authority. Leaving it behind meant more than abandoning an office. It meant entering the East Passage without title, protection, or the right to summon anyone under Moretti command. Dominic's mouth tightened. Walk through those doors and you're finished. Luca pressed the call button inside the elevator. That decision stopped belonging to you. The mechanism groaned. Evelyn blocked the threshold with her forearm. The brass key remained clenched in her other hand, its teeth cutting pale marks into her palm. If you go alone, he changes the story, she said. He calls it a private dispute. Your copies disappear, and mine become the word of an auditor he already framed. She took the original payoff record from beneath her coat and held it beside Dominic's phone. We make the chain public now. Luca understood the cost before she spoke again. Evelyn's plan would protect the evidence, but it would also place her name permanently beside his. No quiet resignation. No clean career elsewhere. Every employer, prosecutor, and newspaper would know she had audited Luca Moretti and chosen to stand beside him when the organization broke apart. Luca opened the recorder on his phone. Then he called Detective Harris's direct line. Dominic lunged for the device, but Evelyn stepped between them and raised her own phone toward his face. The red recording light reflected in his pupils. "Say it again," she said. "Tell them who the target is." Dominic stopped. Behind him, the capos remained silent as the freight cables hummed inside the wall. Luca's call connected. "Detective Harris," he said, his voice carrying through the corridor. "This is Luca Moretti. I am voluntarily surrendering the evidence in my possession, along with my recorded statement. Evelyn Brooks acted under my authority as auditor, and every document she carried was connected to my accounts." The words stripped away Dominic's last defense. Evelyn could no longer be dismissed as a rogue bookkeeper, and Luca could no longer hide behind distance. Harris instructed him to remain where federal agents could receive him. Luca agreed, then transmitted the copies. Delivery confirmations flashed across the screen, one after another, cold blue against his fingers. Dominic stared at them as though each light had locked another door. Luca turned to Evelyn. "Take the original and leave." She shook her head, attached Dominic's recording to the same evidence package, and pressed send. "You answered when I was in custody," she said. "I'm answering now." The elevator descended without them. Its empty steel box vanished into darkness, taking the purchased escape with it. Far below, tires screamed across wet pavement. Men expecting Luca were already closing on the building, while federal sirens rose from the opposite direction. Evelyn slid the original ledger beneath her arm and stood beside him under the amber light. Luca picked up neither the ring nor his old authority. When Dominic reached for the stairwell, Luca closed the fire door and turned the deadbolt. "No more orders," he said. "This time, you stay and answer." Blue light swept across the amber walls as the first federal vehicles entered the loading yard, their sirens dropping into a low mechanical growl. Rain hammered the roof, and beyond the locked fire door came the dull impact of Dominic's shoulder against steel. Evelyn stood beside Luca with the original ledger beneath her arm, its cloth cover rough against her palm. "Moretti," Detective Harris called from the stairwell. "Open the door and keep your hands visible." Luca drew back the deadbolt. Harris entered first, coat dark with rain, followed by federal agents whose boots tracked water across the concrete. At the opposite entrance, Dominic's men saw the badges, lowered their weapons, and stepped away. The command Dominic had redirected toward Luca died without being carried out. Harris looked at the abandoned signet ring, then at Luca's empty hands. "Your evidence was received," he said. "Federal agents need you to remain here." "I'm not leaving." Luca placed his phone on a metal table and turned the screen toward him. The transmitted accounts glowed cold blue. Freight payments, reserve transfers, police payoffs, every transaction bearing the approval codes Luca had allowed his organization to use. He could have blamed Dominic for all of it. Instead, he faced Harris. "My name controlled those accounts. My silence protected them. Record that." The room settled into stillness, broken only by rain ticking against the high windows. Harris activated his recorder. Luca gave his statement without bargaining for immunity, naming the businesses he owned, the money he concealed, and the orders for which he accepted responsibility. Each answer dismantled another wall that wealth and fear had built around him. When the recording ended, Evelyn crossed the floor before an agent could ask for the ledger. Dominic had once counted on her choosing safety over credibility. She laid the original book beside Luca's phone and opened it to the marked transfers. "This is the unaltered record," she said. Then she surrendered Dominic's recording, the brass key, and the payoff document. No deal was offered for this. No payment was accepted. Harris examined the timestamps and nodded toward the locked door. Two agents opened it. Dominic emerged under white fluorescent light, his tailored jacket creased, his voice stripped of command. "She manipulated all of you." Evelyn met his stare. "I gave you one chance to tell the truth. You made the final call yourself." Harris played the recording. Dominic's order to take Luca filled the corridor, sharp and unmistakable. No capo answered him. No purchased officer arrived. cold metal closed around his wrists, and the man who had tried to turn two people into scapegoats was led past the records he could no longer erase. Harris returned to Luca. You understand that statement may cost you your freedom. Luca looked at Evelyn, not for permission, but to acknowledge the price. Yes. Evelyn could still have claimed coercion and walked away as a victim. Instead, she stepped beside him and identified herself as the auditor who had preserved the ledger and designed the trap. Her testimony would be examined, her career exposed, and her quiet life gone. She stayed. Hours later, dawn spread pale gold across the wet pavement outside the 21st precinct. Luca entered custody without his ring, his empire, or the protection of his name. Evelyn walked beside him carrying no emergency cash and no false identity. Only the truth both had chosen to answer for. At 2 a.m, she had asked for the crime boss. By sunrise, the man who came for her had surrendered the power that made him one. And that day, dignity was no longer something Luca Moretti could command. It was something he finally chose to serve.